Call to order the City of Saugatuck's City Council Workshop for April 8th. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Anderson. Here. Baldwin.
Here.
Dean.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Muncy.
Here.
Stanton.
Here.
White. You have a quorum?
Any agenda changes for the workshop? Any guest speakers for the workshop? All right, and this is time for public comment on agenda items only. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak, please come to the podium. State your first and last name and where you live.
My pattern going. Mark Lachey, 345 Grand Street, importantly on the corner of Main Street as well. I'm here to talk about agenda item 6B, limiting parking to one side of certain streets. Let me say I'm 100% in favor of the suggested streets as put in the memo from our acting city manager for a couple of reasons. One, our community is overwhelmingly composed of wood frame homes. Many of them are actually wood homes. My house, for example, was built in 1884. It is 100% wood down to, from the roof, asphalt shingle roof, down to the stone foundation. So the safety concern about fire trucks being able to get down our streets, especially given on the hill and throughout our town, how close lot lines are, how close proximity buildings are. I truly, truly worry that if one of our houses caught on fire, it might not even, it would destroy that house and it might spread. And so the ability for fire trucks to get to fire hydrants, multiple fire trucks. I read it's something I didn't think about, multiple fire trucks having to be able to navigate to get to the same area. And then separately, the age of our community, the population of our community, as well as our visitors. There is certainly a need for the ability of emergency vehicles such as ambulances to get down our streets. When I moved here 11 years ago, it started off, we found that people would come on weekends, holidays, including Venetian Festival and park by our house. Then it got to weekends, and now it's gotten to middle of the weeks, especially in August and July. There are people parking both sides of the street. Maybe one car can get through. And so I just really, really support the suggested limitation on parking onto one side of the street for much of our city as recommended, or at least the portions recommended, for safety, for the well-being of our community. And so I'm really glad you're doing it. It was suggested earlier. I'm really glad you're looking at it, and I'm happy you're looking at it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Bobby Gaunt, 341 Main Street, and I will just echo my friend's comments. Mark Lachey. I live at 341 Main Street and have since 2014. And what you're proposing is really excellent in all respects. There are times that it's hard for me to navigate my mid-size vehicle on the street. And when my husband was ill, it was particularly concerning because of the necessary call at times to the emergency the emergency unit. So at any rate, yes, and so much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Anyone else in the audience? Okay, anyone online? All right. So moving on to our discussion items for today. Item 6A, the milfoil treatment for 2024. It's on page 2 of your packet. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So a little bit of background. I know we have some newer council members since some of the initial milfoil discussions occurred back in 2020. There was concerns around this invasive aquatic plant, weed, essentially. out in the Kalamazoo Harbor, and the city formed an advisory committee to essentially kind of take a look at the issue and kind of come up with some recommendations on how maybe best to deal with it. As a result of that process, there was a recommendation to use essentially chemical treatments within the harbor. So initially, that started back in 2021. There was kind of certain areas that were identified for treatment, and then there was some interest from private property owners to also treat areas around their docks as well, as my understanding. And so at that time, there was kind of an agreement with those property owners. If they wanted to opt in, they could, but then the city would bill them for that cost. And so the first year this happened, they did some spot treatments and then treated the areas of concern. The city and the city treasurer is here, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. We had good response, the folks kind of paying those invoices the first year. The second year, we were kind of looking at the same thing, and then kind of saw, my understanding is less property owners were maybe willing to pay those invoices. They had maybe some concerns about whether or not the treatments were in fact working or not, and whether they wanted to spend their dollars on that. And then last year, the city covered the entire cost of treating the shoreline and then kind of the harbor area. So we kind of wanted to bring this forth to you today as a council to kind of discuss 2024 and how you want to proceed for 2024. If there's certain areas that you're going to treat the same areas, maybe modify things. But we also have with us today, Ryan, is it Sholin? Sholin, if you want to maybe come up, if that's all right, Mayor.
Yes, please come on
He's from
up to the
Aquatic
podium.
Doctors, and he's been the contractor that's been treating areas in both Douglas and the city for the last few years. And I figured we'd kind of bring him in today to kind of talk about how treatment's been going, what they're seeing out there, what their recommendations are, and then allow you as a council to ask some questions about how we go from here.
Okay. All right.
Like you said, my name is Ryan Sholin. I'm the president and owner of Aquatic Doctors. Ryan asked me to come out and kind of answer any questions you guys have. I brought the two head applicators that do the work. So everything that you guys might have for questions, we've got the guys that are doing the work and can kind of answer anything that you guys might have concerns about or kind of where things are going. That's kind of what I'm here for, and happy to help out any way I can.
Okay. Council members, do you have questions while he is here?
I do, yes, thank you. Douglas is going to participate and they've already agreed to
Yes.
do so.
Yep.
And any other local, what other communities around us are participating as well?
It's basically you guys. It's Douglas and you guys, and that basically have covered everything from the bridge, basically their lagoon area over there by their boat launch up to the bridge and then on both sides. So.
But no one on the township and the Kalamazoo area is doing any of?
Oh, the Silver Lake?
Yeah,
There's about a dozen, there's about a dozen residents that are doing.
okay, so the residents are doing it, but the township is not doing it.
Correct.
Okay.
Down on the Silver Lake area,
Okay.
the residents are doing it individually.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Scott.
More of a request. If we do contract with you guys, could you make sure you do some outreach to the Saugatuck Yacht Club next time? Because I think the sailing program kids got surprised. I think you were doing Douglas at the same time the sailing program was going, and I think that the application going on when the kids were out doing the sailing
Mm.
Yeah.
caused some concerns. So,
Absolutely, no problem.
Yeah.
What we do, we already have it scheduled.
good.
Because we're already have the permit going. Everything's in place for the paperwork with the state of Michigan for authorization, state permits, everything's done. We already have the dates scheduled. So at a drop of a hat, we basically can provide you with the dates with, I think the first treatment's in June, so you could get, 2 months, 2+ months in advance notice of when the days are gonna be. So there should be no problem. However you guys want to do it with a public notification, whether it's an email, a Facebook kind of thing, whatever you guys want to do. We can provide you with the detailed information and then, have at it for as far as notification goes, giving them plenty of time if they'd like to contact me particularly for any detailed specifics as to what to avoid, what to look for, what we're going after, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we should absolutely be able to do that.
If you wouldn't mind, I was just curious, do you happen to have any like drone footage or anything to show if there's any kind of reduction or a proof of reduction or anything like that so we can feel good about how the treatment has been going?
We don't really have drone footage, but we certainly, I'm guessing, did we take pictures before and after? I know we've taken before.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I mean, we could certainly provide that.
that would
What it
be
is,
great.
It's one of those things where you can't, there's no such thing as preventative treatment. So in other words, we'd be out there right now and say, hey, we could just do it now, lay all the products down, the stuff won't ever grow. The way that we're allowed to do it by the state and the way the products work is you have to wait for the plants to be present. So that's why we do it in June instead of April.
Okay.
So we have to have everything growing in there. So you'll know where we treat because it'll be there and then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it's gone. So
Okay.
it's kind of one of those things where it's very easy to see because you look out there in the harbor and you've got a bunch of green stuff and plants and everything, and then 3 weeks later, it's gone. So it would be easy for us to take pictures. I'm sure residents notice it. I mean, especially in the Douglas harbor over there where it's, a foot deep. I mean,
Right.
My gosh, it looks like a football field, and then all of a sudden it looks like water again. So it'd be super easy for us to provide that. If that was something you want, we just take some pictures before, take some pictures afterwards, and you definitely have some comparison. And you guys as individuals certainly too, just go down to the.
Yeah,
local
and if you
river
have them
down
from
there.
the past treatments to see, just to show, the progress, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'll dig through the cameras and see what we can come up with and email those to Ryan. And I can tell you, we certainly will do that before and after this year. So we would at least have something from 24.
That'd be
for you.
great. Gregory?
Yeah, how long have you guys been working with us with this milfoil program?
I think he said it was 21. I think
It
we
was
started,
21?
I think we started in Douglas the year before.
Uh-huh.
And then it was a collaboration because what we do is we get you guys in the same permit, just kind of saves you guys some money. The state allows us, since it's the same general adjacent area, we're allowed to combine the city of Douglas and the city of Saugatuck into one permit. And basically, you guys are allowed to split the permit fee instead of doing one. And when you're talking permits that cost $1,600, it's an advantage. So we started with them, I think, in 20, and then I think we started with you guys in 21.
Sure. And I've noticed a big improvement this last summer.
Mhm.
I mean, you could really see it. I could tell. We're being asked by our interim manager, if we wish for the treatment to be limited to areas adjacent to the city property to cover the same area as shown the attached map here that he provided us. Is there any suggestions that you have other than what you're proposing, or, because I'm not out there. I don't know how bad it is. And I am wondering, like, is there something other than what we're doing that you would suggest us to do, or, is there?
So, my name is Zach Berry. Aiden and I do the treatments
Good.
pretty much for both Saugatuck and Douglas. So the bigger areas that you do, kind of like how you guys did the last couple of years are great because, on the shoreline areas, we're managing a lot of milfoil, we're managing duckweed, which is a floating plant. And so when you cover a larger area, it's going to be, you'll have better results in the long run, longer lasting results because of the areas that are treated are going to provide like a buffer around, say, your main bay area. The green there, the green is huge. That's where most of your milfoil is. I would say 90% of it is in that shallow bay there.
Mhm.
And like, is it Greg?
Yeah.
Like Greg was saying, the first year that we managed out there, that whole bay was like topped out. It was
Yeah.
like a football field.
Mhm.
Last year, it
It was incredible.
was fantastic. We
Yeah.
were really happy, really impressed with the results. So we expect more of the same. I don't know if Ryan covered it, but like the way milfoil grows is it kind of, it establishes itself and then over time it creates like a seed bank. So basically there's seeds that are dropped from the plants down into the sediment and they'll lie dormant for years. And then until it's their their time to shine, for lack of a better word. So basically what happens there is, you'll start to see a slow reduction, but I mean, getting on top of that seed bank, because God knows how long that's been untreated for.
Yeah.
And so how long that milfoil's been there will determine how long you're gonna, until you start seeing the results that like, where it's like, okay, now we used to treat 40 acres out there and now we're treating 10, it's a matter of time. It does happen, but that's one thing to keep. So like having a larger, going back to the original question, having that larger treatment area gives you better coverage. So say like we were in there, it's like, okay, well, this year we only want to treat a 10-acre section of that 40 acres. Well, it's like, okay, yep, that's great. We'll kill what's in there, but everything that grows out around that in the current and stuff more seeds will drift into your area. So covering a larger area is more advantageous because it gives you guys a better buffer zone around the city itself. If that
Go
makes
ahead.
sense.
Yeah, and it's great to have the experts here, but when we did the study group in 2020, I believe we learned as we were educating ourselves about milfoil that it tends to like fairly shallow water because when it's deep enough, I guess there's not enough light or whatever
Yeah,
for the plants to grow. So given that our water levels are probably down about a foot,
Mm.
and it looks like it's gonna stay that way this year, we're particularly vulnerable, I would think, for spread this year. You
Yeah.
guys correct me if I'm wrong,
Yep,
but
yep.
Well, that's
And there's a
true.
lot of factors that go into, milfoil growth and all that stuff. I mean, the water quality's got to be right. But we have projects that we work on that we're treating milfoil in like 30 foot of water.
okay.
And so, I mean, it can grow. I mean, definitely shallow water, it thrives the most because it obviously will suck out of the sunlight, get as much sunlight as possible in that shallower water.
Yeah.
But what makes invasive species particularly dangerous is the fact that they're super prolific. They can survive in almost all different conditions. So that's what makes them such a problem, because like, it's hard to slow them down because they spread like crazy, and they can survive in a lot of different varieties of water depths, of water qualities, of pHs, alkalinities, things like that. But yeah, and so, I mean, with definitely having shallow water, like, that's why Douglas gets it so bad, because their whole bay in there is, there's like a channel, I think, that goes through it
Yeah.
that might be 3 foot deep, and the rest of it's like a foot deep. And so when it starts, it's like wildfire.
Remind me again, did you treat all the way the dock area, the shoreline area, all the way down to Willow Park, basically to the north there? Did you treat along the shoreline where the docks are? Or did you only, yeah,
Yep.
yep.
For you guys. So, yeah, I mean, yeah.
And up there. So I mean, you're looking at a large street there that's starting to get those, we've got our claws into it, and we're starting to see some of that long-term benefit.
Yeah.
Because like you said, those seed banks will stay in there for decades. It's a matter of they're there, they're not going anywhere until they get their opportunity to grow, and they get their opportunity to grow by the other plants that are there dying and being managed. And then they will kind of reproduce, and then kind of sooner over time, that seed bank would be fewer and fewer and fewer.
Because
And
they've
that's
been
where you
treated.
get into a situation where you're like, okay, now we can start to reduce, because we're kind of managing the areas that have the higher concentration of the seeds. So it's and including that, the idea that, it's a pretty regulated industry. I mean, it's not like the state just says, hey, have fun, have it. You go do what you want to do. Every ounce of product we put in there has to be approved by the state. The timing that we do it, the restrict, I mean, it is extremely regulated. So the idea of it being eradicated isn't something that you should really think is a possibility. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
But the idea is get it down to where it's a manageable area.
Yeah.
And then it's like cut your yard, you know what I mean? Every once a week, you cut your grass in your yard, same kind of concept. 2 times a season, you're gonna be coming out here and managing some of the higher concentrated areas where you really wanna make sure that the areas look good for the, people out there, the voters and the fishermen.
Yeah.
And the people that want to use the water.
Scott, go ahead.
Well,
Oh, I'm
you
sorry.
wanna go ahead. Helen?
I'm just curious about billing us versus Douglas. I mean, I know that there was a situation where now, if Douglas has further out shallow, and I mean, with the kayak launches and all that stuff, and I've waded through that. They definitely need it. But I mean, I would like to know, like, do you bill just based on the shoreline? We've got a deeper shoreline typically than Douglas, or do you charge on, the product that you use, the acreage?
It's on the shore.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I don't love that because
They're completely separate as far as
Yeah.
like their invoices go to them. and it's
Okay.
based on, it's not one invoice that I say, well, I think we did 80% for them and 20
Okay.
for you. It is completely separate.
Okay.
They have.
We just have the
absolutely
same
nothing-
permit.
Okay.
nothing-
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing to do.
I just want to make sure that you weren't using like 2x the product on theirs, but they've got a quarter of the shoreline, but you know what I mean? So, okay.
The only thing that even remotely kind of ties you guys together is the adjacent locations, because you're both, in fact, they're a permit. And that has nothing to do with the treatment. That's basically just the state's permit. They're done at the same time, but they're done by different boats. I mean, he's doing Sagatuck, he's doing Douglas.
Perfect.
The invoices are done, the permits are done, or the treatment reports and everything are done. So there's never a matter of how much, there's nothing that would relate you guys as far
Great.
as invoicing goes. As far as paperwork goes, yes, but not as far as invoicing. There would be no bleeding over at all.
This
Thank
is,
you.
this is where I was gonna go on the billing. Can you give us some sense of some of your other municipal customers, how they bill? Because, we've had, the first year we did it, we got people to opt in and they paid into it. Then they sort of fell off per Ryan's note. And now we've got to consider, an assessment or not.
How,
Assessment, when you're dealing with municipalities, SADs, special assessment districts, things like that is really a big way that it's done. Because it's just kind of taken care of. Once you get it approved, it's done. There's not really much discussion about it. When you get into individuals kind of signing up and paying, because in some locations we do, even if it's an association where it's not a formal association, we have to deal with every single house on the lake. It just really becomes difficult. Then you get into a situation kind of like we did last year with the credit you guys would be getting. It's just a matter of, in the beginning, individuals were paying, doing that, and then it got to the point, if memory serves, you guys kind of decided to just do it because it was just gonna be something you guys were gonna do, because the idea of trying to get each person to collect and invoice them was just overwhelming. So it was a matter of you guys just kind of said, all right, we're gonna do it. So I think if you're gonna try and do that, my suggestion would be the tax, you do
Go the assessment.
special assessment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm.
Go ahead.
If I may, I think that that's tempting always, and I understand it, of course, like, oh, if you've got a business or a home or whatever, but at the same time, I mean, it's ours to take care of, and we all use the so I understand the temptation, obviously, to be like, well, if you're on the lakefront, why shouldn't you pay for X, Y, and Z? Well, all of us use the lake.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that that's a separate part of the discussion outside of what us hiring, aquatic doctors, but, and again, I'm all for people paying their fair share and this and that, but I just don't think that it's just as cut and dried as being like, who's ever got the frontage should have to pay X
Yeah,
amount.
Yeah,
and I
and
think
it-
that kind of goes to the special assessment is if you guys, I don't know how you guys do it, but you might have the ability, who's to say that, because this happens, we call them riparians, they're not
Mhm.
frontage owners, but they're riparians of that, going to what you're discussing. So when you do a special assessment like that, are you able to kind of break that down into, okay, yes, you can locate who is the frontage, but also people that are not on the frontage, you know what I mean? That
Yeah, and
they-
Peter can address this of, how it was first done. We did have, people that were on the front, the businesses and the homeowners, they did pay it the first year. Second year, we weren't tracking a lot of people down. They weren't paying their bills. We sent it out. And then we decided the third year that the city would cover the costs.
Mhm.
I mean, was it decided as a council? I mean, I believe it was decided as a council that we were okay with that.
Mhm.
Part of it's complicated because, if you leave some out, it just leaves places for these seed beds to stay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's almost, an argument can be made on one hand, just to do it just because you're more effective, just like cooperating with Douglas makes us
Yeah.
more effective. But on the flip side, we are making a move as a council to make sure that people that have short-term rentals are paying their fair share.
Mhm.
So people that are benefiting from leasing slips, they're running businesses, I mean, it's a fair question, are they paying their fair share through an assessment or in the absence of an assessment? So
Yeah.
we have to ask that question.
I consider our waterways almost like streets.
Yeah.
Taking care of streets and
Yeah.
that, like, we're all using the streets, we're all using the waterways. I don't just pay like Campbell just got redone and no one goes, well, Helen lives off Campbell, so we should, she should pay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really can see both sides. I understand the temptation. I really do.
Yeah.
I just.
Fortunately for me, that dilemma is above my pay grade.
Yeah.
So-
I'm sorry. That's why I was like, maybe we don't have to like punish you with having to listen to this part. So.
Well, no, I mean,
Do
certainly,
this on our own time.
certainly everybody uses the dinghy dock. Certainly everybody needs to access the fuel dock. But there are other docks that are private docks.
But
And
it's not all dock. I mean, we have to protect the waterway, right? Like,
So-
I
oh
mean,
yeah, I
Ryan, if you wouldn't mind addressing the fact that we would have to redo an assessment and have public hearings on this, correct? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, to do a special assessment, it's a lengthy process. I mean, there's 3 separate resolutions that the council would have to approve and a couple public hearings. A lot of study to make sure that we're real accurate with, the amount of area that's being treated for a particular person and they're being charged and, the amount, that's, lines up with what you want to assess. So
Yeah.
there's a process involved. Certainly not something that, we're gonna, it would take a while. So I think at the same time, I think, and talking with your treasurer and is that, for a few years, you were budgeting $55,000 and then, first couple of years hoping to get half of that back. But now we're kind of to the point where, the estimated cost for this year is at $75,000. So just, it's greater pressure on your general fund. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's ultimately a kind of a decision to kind of wrestle with. And if I could ask one question, if it's all right, Mayor, just you kind of mentioned at some point we might be able to kind of dial it back and treat less area. Any sense on what that timeframe looks like? Are we talking like next couple of years? Are we talking it's going to be several years? I mean, because this is the amount of acreage here that's shown is certainly well beyond what I think the initial advisory committee was thinking would need to be treated. And I'm not saying that there's not a good case for it. I just trying to get an
I
estimate
think
on.
we've started at that point where we're starting to see, you know, some better results, like Greg had mentioned, like he really noticed some big improvements last year, where I think the first couple of years we're just trying to kind of corral the problem. Whereas last year it was seemed to be more of like, all right, now we're starting to really take some, I mean, when you get into timing, it's difficult because it's Mother Nature.
Right.
I mean, you could find that we have a summer that is just cold and rainy for the most part, and plants aren't going to grow as aggressively just by the fact that it's cold and rainy. Or vice versa, it's 90 and sunny every day, so they're just going to go hog wild. So there may be fewer plants, but it appears to be worse because these plants are just so aggressively healthy. So, I mean, the last thing I want to do is just say, I don't know. But in all honesty and candor, if I did know, and if I could answer that, it would be a matter of simply saying, I can predict the weather, what if the summer is going to look like for the next 3 years. And that's just kind of things you can't do. But I can tell you, I do believe that we are kind of, we've turned the corner into the point where we're not just trying to corral the issue now. We're actually taking some chunks out of that. How big those chunks are, how long they're, you know, how much they're going to prove and how things are going to change in the future. That's kind of Mother Nature and what we have to wait to see how it goes. But I do think that we're past that point of just trying to get control of it. We're actually making some improvements now.
Anyone else have, go ahead, Russ.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. A lot of great questions from council today. So a lot of things that I wanted to ask have been asked. You mentioned earlier that we are not talking about eradication. We're talking about control, basically, right? So I want to ask Councilmember Dean, who was on the original task force, prior to 2020, was there an issue with milfoil? I honestly don't, I mean, duckweed's always been a problem on the water.
Yeah.
But the
Yes.
milfoil itself.
Yeah, no, it has been there for quite some time and it started to get really out of hand because I don't think we treated in 2020 because it was COVID or, you know, just a lot was going on. And I don't think there was treatment in either 19 or a couple of years went by and I can't remember the exact time, but it got out of hand. It got really out of hand. It was a mess.
That's.
That, yeah.
If you, if we've had, I'll tell you a story.
Zach, could you step to the mic?
So like an issue with when you go and say, you know, you look at, you know, like say 2 years down the road, whatever, for an example, it's like, yeah, it's looking pretty good out here. I don't think we're gonna need anything or whatever. You know, we'll take the year off, we'll take 2 years off. When you're dealing with milfoil, some weeds, it works great. You know, your native pond weeds, you know, those things generally are fine. But with milfoil, we've had clients even south of here that we managed the lake for how long? Like
20 years.
Yeah, it's 20 years. And so, and when we would show up to that lake, they were on just the maintenance program at this point. So like when Aquatic Doctors first got the contract, the lake was a mess. And so 20 years goes by, we've got it on a maintenance program. We got a healthy population of native plants. We're just doing minimal treatments out there. Well, they got to the point where they were like, you know, I think we're good. You know, I think there's not much out there. We'll take a break. And me personally went to that lake last summer and the entire 126 acres of that lake was topped out with milfoil. I mean, solid. You could walk across it. It was insane. And so that's when, you know, when you talk about like the maintenance program, that's why it's important. It's like, yeah, it's like you do good and it looks good for a couple of years and it's like, yeah, we probably don't need it next year. Well, then you leave it sit for 2 years, all that seed bank starts to blow up again. And then you start right back to where you live. Like, that's the point of the whole story is like, this lake looked great for 15 years. And then the moment they quit for 1 year, and then they're back to absolute square one. To where we have to start all over.
It's not just a matter of taking care of those areas that we're treating, it's also a matter of those areas spreading to other areas. So you get into a 10 acre area, okay, great, that's what we're focusing on, but what you're not seeing and thinking about is the other 40 acres around it that are kind of being managed because the 10 acres you're focusing on are not allowed to spread and kind of work their way into the other areas. And that's why milfoil is such an invasive problem, because it outcompetes native plants. I mean, for decades and centuries and however long, native plants in Michigan have kind of been getting along. They have an equilibrium. They grow about the same. They don't outcompete each other, and you've got a nice, healthy body. These European plants started to come over, they just completely wipe out everything else. They snuff them right out because they can grow so much faster than everything. So it's a matter of controlling certain areas, but also that control is preventing spread, which is the real issue when you talk about invasive species. That's why they're so invasive, because they did just grow faster than the other plants do.
Russ, was there anything more that you wanted from Scott? This Scott right here.
No.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay.
So we're going to be going into year 4 of this, and I'm in support of control of this. I'm just trying to get a sense of, are we talking about a $55,000 or $65,000 investment every year going forward for our citizens? As opposed to, are we going to see a reduction in cost as this continues to be controlled? And it sounds like there may be some factors that are out of our control, as the weather,
Yeah.
other conditions, use of the depth of the water, et cetera. So
I think that you're looking to, my expectations are going to be that it will get less and less. I just don't think it's ever going to get to zero. You know,
Yeah,
it's not
that-
going to go away. You know, we might get into a point where, okay, we've got it under good control, everything, we're in a management program, you know, we're spending $5,000, $10,000, you know, as opposed to the larger numbers. I think that's where we're going. In my 30 years experience of doing this, that's pretty much the direction that you go. This is a little bit different because it's a river. So you're constantly new things are being introduced. Whereas a lake that's kind of self-contained, you know, once you kind of get control, you have a little bit more power over that. Because you can just kind of mitigate that with, you know, all right, clean your boats, you know, make sure your fishing lures and things, you know, those kind of things where it's a lot more, you have hands-on. Whereas a river, there's things upriver that you can't control and you have no idea what's even going on in many cases. So this one's a little bit more fluid. But I still have every expectation that, yeah, it's going to come down because that seed bank is going to be diminished. And the areas that we're controlling are going to be prevented from spreading to other areas that may not have been a problem in the past or weren't as big a problem in the past. Yeah.
Anybody else have any?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
so the fact that the Village of Douglas, the city of the Village of Douglas is doing their treatment in Wade's Bayou,
Mhm.
that helps us because then seeds are not going to be coming down
Tremendously. Yeah.
and
Especially when.
whatever the
it
term is,
floats. I
but-
mean, if they were a mile upriver, I would still say, yeah, it's benefiting you. But the fact that they're adjacent to the other side of the river, without question.
okay.
Because when they do have those boats, you know, I mean, one of the main ways this stuff grows is fragmentation. So you get a boat that drives through that, their props are just tearing those things up, boom, all those little things float right over to your lagoon.
Okay.
Or your harbor. So that them doing that is dramatic. It's a symbiotic relationship, you know, what you're doing and vice versa. What you guys are doing is helping them as well. Probably not as much because I think you guys are a little bit farther down. So the current's going to carry theirs, but what they're doing is definitely helping you guys.
So the risk of not doing anything at all is going to be continued growth along those areas that have been treated so far. And is the channel itself, which obviously you don't treat because there's moving water and there's boats and other marine traffic
Yeah.
going through there.
I don't think that, I wouldn't look at this as you're gonna get into a situation where the channel is gonna be blocked. I've a boat or two, so I mean, there's boats, you guys, you know, they're gonna continue to keep that channel open. But the problem is gonna be that if you don't do anything, you're gonna get back into the situation where it was before we started quite quickly, and then it'll just get worse. You know, the lagoons, I mean, that's just kind of the design of a pond. You know, ponds weren't really, they're not there to be forever. You know, you get a pond, okay, and if nothing's done, eventually it turns into a wetland, a marsh, a wetland, and then it's a field. And that's basically the life cycle of a pond. Same principle. You know, if it's not managed, lakes and things over time, decades, eons, however long, you know, a pond that was here now wasn't here 200 years ago. You know, that's just kind of whether it's an invasive species or if it's just a matter of water or whatever the natural occurrences. Bodies of water weren't really designed to be here for eternity. They come and go, they ebb and flow. Rivers are a little different, like I said, because you're getting a much different structure from flow and where the water's coming from than you are.
Change faster than.
Yeah. So the real risk is just simply a matter of you will absolutely get back to the condition that you were in, and then all things being fair, it would get worse because like I said, these are invasive species. The longer they are allowed to go, the more native species that they're going to just wipe out.
One last question, I promise. So we have two other bodies of water which immediately come to mind when we talk about this. The Basin Cove down at the lake where the channel goes out to the lake. There's a little cove there. Are you familiar with it? Have we seen, I haven't heard any evidence of
I
milfoil in
haven't seen
that
any
space,
milfoil there.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
which is kind of curious. And then also Oxbow itself, which is a navigable waterway, which is the old channel. I'm kind of curious now as to whether that's even invaded. Milfoil's gotten into that area too. I don't even know if you guys had any experience with that. You know what I'm talking about though, right? Yeah. Curious. Okay, thank you. I
No, we're
appreciate-
not, we're not managing it.
Yeah,
so,
no,
mean,
I,
that doesn't
no, I
mean
know,
it's
I
not
just,
being
it
managed.
got me
Yeah,
thinking about
so,
those areas. So
Yeah.
We don't want milfoil to ruin our cove parties.
that's,
I
right.
was gonna say, it's probably mitigated by the
Cove
urine.
is-
Go ahead, Scott.
Cove is pretty deep. It drops off quickly in the cove. I can't speak to Oxbow. That one area in the green is super susceptible because the way the river flows,
Mhm.
there's an eddy and it deposits,
right back in.
a ton of sediment in that green area. It kind
Right.
of spins back around. It just gets really shallow.
That's Wade's by you too.
It's the same story with Wade's.
The flow.
Yeah, but one other question, going to Douglas. Now, we don't have the Douglas treatment area on the map, but the Safe Harbor Marine area, is Douglas treating the Safe Harbor or is Safe Harbor contracting on their own to get the area? Yes.
Yeah, they would be from what I understand, they'd be contracting on their own. That was where the confusion came in and where the credit would apply, because when we had kind of started, when you guys decided that you guys were gonna kind of take this on and you're gonna do the shorelines, it was kind of the conversation we had with the other Ryan was kind of, we were under the impression from the bridge up, kind of both sides, that was kind of the thing. From the bridge to the chain ferry was kind of where we were at mentally with
Yeah.
that. And we didn't really kind of put together that, okay, that didn't include the Douglas portion of that.
Right.
So it was like, it's all permitted. It was all, everything was done correctly. There was no foul. It's just simply an invoicing matter of, we didn't know to stop that and we didn't. Douglas, I don't know that they're gonna pay for that. That would be the individuals that did that. But that's where the confusion came, was we were under the impression that you guys wanted to do that. And that's where that invoice came and that's where the credit's gonna come from.
But right now, we're not aware of who, if anyone's doing the area in Douglas that is run by Safe Harbor. We don't know, or do you know? Have you been in touch with them?
I have not gotten, yeah.
For Douglas, they want us to do pretty much up to that full launch was in Union Street.
Okay, yep.
And so that's,
Right,
that's
so right.
where I last left with them was to the Union Street launch.
Okay.
So we could, I mean, if you want us to talk to those people, or if you have, you know what I mean? I know Tower Marine, why we did speak with them a few years ago, and they were very interested, but then all of a sudden it was a matter of, we assumed that the Saugatuck was taking care of that, so that never really went further, so.
It just goes back to my earlier point. I mean, there is a example of a commercial entity
Yeah.
that would probably have to pay for it themselves. So I just
Okay.
raise it because we want to, the argument could be made that we're not being consistent if, well, it's more Douglas.
It's Douglas's side.
But, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any other further discussion?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much
much
for
for
your time.
coming in.
Certainly, I'm in communication with Ryan and anybody else, you know, if throughout this meeting, questions arise, or if there's anything that, particular things kind of come up and locations to focus on, or really anything under the sun,
Great.
well, I'm available for you, and we'll make sure we get anything you need done.
All right.
To you.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I could, for
Go ahead,
for
Ryan.
council's purposes, for your next regular meeting, I want to put their agreement on your agenda to vote on. Ultimately, which direction would you like to go? Would you like to go with everything for another year? Would you like to do just that green portion and just, Coughlin Park, around there and Wicks and, the boat launch and the Spear? Would you like to do the entire shoreline as shown and presented? Everything there is going to be about $75,000 in a calendar year.
Including the whole blue area or just the green area?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Green, blue and red, all
Credit
of
that we
it.
got for last year.
Minus
The credit.
7,000.
Yep.
I mean, you've heard my concerns about sort of being consistent with cost sharing, but from my perspective, it has to be done. Even around the condos, around the fuel dock, it can get shallow really quick. And that's going to create an environment for this to grow even more than it did in previous years, given the low water levels we have. So, Yeah, we don't have a choice. I just raise for all of you just to consider, if we're being fair with, the costs associated with people that are benefiting with private docks in this area. But I mean, I'm not going to stand, I'm 100% for doing it, the whole Monty. So I think we have to, or otherwise it's just not as effective.
Right.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think we can not do it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy it's, deferred maintenance and then you get, stuck with a bigger bill down the line. I do think it's worth, I mean, especially for Tower Marine, and again, I know that that's Douglas, but I do think a big commercial area, I would think that they should pay for that. But I do tend to view the waterways as, I mean, they are like streets, so I'm okay. I don't know. It would be interesting. Peter, do you have data on like what percentage of those are private docks, or did we have a sense of that?
What's private and what, and what's commercial. I mean, if you start. Here's the Butler, that's all, which is all commercial. You got Pearl. I would say this whole area is all commercial. On our side of the river here is all, private residences really. Well, you got Casa Loma, I don't know if they rent out, and then. But most of that's all private. I mean, this side of the river is all some kind of a commercial entity in one form.
Probably the only exception would be Wicks Park boat slips.
Right.
Well, yeah, we paid, see, when we originally started this. I was always under pressure, not everybody through here. East Shore paid, two of these people paid, it was sporadic.
It was
So I don't know, and I said, how these guys keep control
Yeah.
of what they did, and so the bills originally came when they started. It was like $25,000 to $27,000 of treatment. And that would happen in 21, that happened in 22, that happened in June of 23. And the July bill was 45,000. That's when then all of a sudden that Ryan that was here, it took him 2 weeks to call, I think enough courage to call me back and say, you billed us wrong or something. Well, no, they've been billing us incorrectly for the first 2.5 years worth of treatments. And now then we catch, they've really been billing us incorrectly because they charge us from basically the swing bridge all the way to the Saugatuck Yacht Club too, and we have that credit coming back, so.
So Peter, did they explain what the difference between the $25,000 treatments and the $45,000 treatments? So is it
Yeah.
just the,
What his explanation was, is Ryan said he never caught it. When we originally started this in 21, the first discussions, it was just to treat this area. And then we had all these private citizens start, and well, can I get my dock done? Then I think the council came, well, we wanted Wicks Park done, our docks, and then more and more people, word of mouth, they started calling, they were writing notes, and it was kind of handed off to me. I was like the third person then. And then we got these bills and we billed everybody, and most people everybody paid the first year. The second year, there was no communications to the residents, and we sent out bills, and people like, I didn't ask for this, but I'll pay for it, and I don't think it's working. How do we know it's working? And then last year we did it all.
Yeah.
And they miscalculated because what happened is Ryan got his accounts receivable and our bill was only 27,000 and Douglas's was 31,000. Well, they're doing like twice the area in Douglas, and they said there's a problem. Well, they never added all these other private pieces on here forever. Whoever, they just started doing it and they didn't bill us. That's their story, that they did not bill us. So
that
that's
seems
why it went up
goofy.
18 grand. And then I didn't, well, this guy gave me a line, so I went on Douglas's website, and pulled up their bill, yeah, and their bill was 31,000, ours was 26, and they're doing a lot more area around here than somebody in their billing department, wherever their office is, must have made a major error, nobody reviewed it after 2.5 seasons, so that was his story. Then now he's giving us a credit back, which comes to about 75,000, because, kind of went from a small thing at 27,000, we were like 55,000 for a whole season. It's in 2 different fiscal years. And then now the price, it gets your attention. We went way up. Now it's come back somewhere, but still it's a $75,000 cost for a season split between 2 different fiscal years. So.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of people, I think people, if we'd have communicated to them in a better way, some people don't, well, I don't think it's working. I'm not a water biologist, I don't know. I don't have a boat out here to see if it's working or not working. And you're kind of like, I don't know what to tell you. So that's, But that's how where we're at now, that the
Do we,
price.
do we feel good about how we're being billed for this now going forward?
I think we've had a great communication with Ryan, because I told Ryan Cummins here, there's an issue here. We need to get control what we're paying for, because I've never seen a map like this, what's colored, and I thought it was like hit and miss. And on the Park Street side of the river, there weren't that many people that paid and were ever interested in the beginning. So I was surprised to see that whole red line that they were treating, basically they were treating the city limits, on both sides of the river.
Peter, do you remember when not assessments, but when the individual charges were developed for the properties, commercial and private? Was it based on frontage? Was
Yeah,
it based on,
it
okay,
was.
do you remember what the average cost?
It said the rate was, it was like $2 a foot or something. It was
Wasn't
something
bad.
like that. It was based on your, how many, and we went back off the
I
plat
paid it.
books, how many,
But it should,
yes.
I'm sorry, please.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna ask, so for a typical property, it would have been how much? A couple
Like
thousand?
the small residential ones are like $100 to maybe $200 the most, and that was twice. You had a June treat, then we had a
Okay.
July treatment, so. But
So,
Yeah.
so it's your impression that the reason why the payments fell off is because people just weren't being communicated to and understood
that's what
they
I
were-
believe.
okay.
They weren't given the year two, they weren't given this option. There was probably about, and then people would say, well, I'll pay this bill, but take me off the list. I don't think it's working. Well, I don't have an answer if it's not
Right.
working.
That one's
I
tricky.
think that there should either be a special assessment or we take care of it, but we don't put it out there and let the good
Right,
people
right,
pay.
yes.
Well, that's
in
the thing,
in the-
because I paid.
Yeah. So I don't like that option at all. Like
No.
we either have a special assessment or the city picks it up, but to put it
Make
out
it
there.
voluntary.
Here's your suggested
Volunteer.
payment. Should you choose to,
Yes.
no, that
And
doesn't.
It doesn't work
Then I
that way.
become like this bill collector, and then what do we do?
Right.
So,
It's not efficient for staff.
no.
To
Right.
administer it. And it's also.
It's not fair to the residents.
Well, and there's
Well,
nothing
it's
that,
Also not efficient for the treatment, because if you have a couple holdouts,
Yeah.
that's just a place for those seeds to develop and.
well, and there was no punishment if they didn't
And
pay it.
Well, the whole thing needs to be treated. I think we're all on that page,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
The whole thing needs to be treated.
I agree.
It just, probably, if it's special assessment, or we just foot the bill, so.
Right.
just-
Agree with
But I
that.
think we've got a handle under the cost now.
I guess this is an example, given, the process. I mean, I guess, maybe we can put a pin in it and talk about it, what for
If-
for next year, but this year, I mean, we got to get it done, so.
Yeah.
And there's
I'm on that
not-
page.
There's not time for a.
I'm on
public-
the page.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
City do it this year, and then if we decide to take it up next year, get it done early on and decide if we're gonna do special assessment.
Well, the upside is we're capturing some of our short-term rental costs now. So, I mean, that should help defray costs that the city was paying for that we won't be. I mean, for this year at least, so that we can get it going.
I don't question the small little area that's of greatest concern where the water, the eddy is developing. I guess my bigger question, long-term is, down from there, from Coughlin Park all the way down to the Chain Ferry, and then on the other side on Park Street. Maybe we don't know this today, but I'd be curious to see if that really has an impact on milfoil. The eddy for sure, because that's where it tends to collect and grow, and then seeds will probably spread out from
Yeah.
there. So I kind of question that. But then number two is in terms of the special assessment, I always think about who's going to benefit the most from this. And, the people that don't have a boat or don't get out on the water often may look at it and say, I don't really get much benefit from it. I mean, it helps the community, yes, but that's kind of where I start thinking about maybe a special assessment would be appropriate. We've already got some precedent here, not as an assessment, but we've got precedent to have private property and commercial property pay for this treatment in conjunction with the city. And the city's carrying most of the lion's share of the cost anyway, even in that situation. So I'm still on the fence about that. I lean more towards talking about a special assessment district going forward. But I agree with the other council members, at least the ones that have spoken, that, there's a need to get this done this year. But I also question the other areas that are outside of the eddy area.
Admittedly, on the park side, I've never witnessed any problems with the milfoil on that side, but that's just me.
I think that's because there's a channel that's maintained.
Yeah.
All the way to the Saugatuck Yacht
Right.
Club and
It tends to-
and a safe harbor. So there's an established channel. So, the comment about roadways, I agree, but to me, the roadways are sort of the channels that are navigable, that we have an obligation to take care of because they are like sort of the thoroughfares and you know where, well, we all know where the channels are if you're out there on a boat. Which makes, it's a sidebar question, but do we have that Army Corps activity happening this year to dredge? Have we heard from them? We were given a big grant.
That was
last
only
year.
supposed to go down like towards the end of it
Yeah.
wouldn't come all the way
No,
down.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious.
I'll make a
I don't
note.
wanna put you on the spot.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, but I'm happy to follow up and see, what their schedule looks like.
And
I
maybe
know what
we're
you're
in
talking-
good, maybe we're in good shape. I just looked, I was out at the end of the pier yesterday and it looked, you could see a change in depth that looked pretty pronounced to me, but once
Okay,
again,
yeah,
I didn't have.
And hopefully the Harbor Authority, they meet tomorrow, right, Logan? I believe.
Yes.
Harbor,
Oh,
yeah. It's something that I'm hoping that they'll talk about a little bit more in depth. So,
Didn't mean to take us off track, just
Nope,
popped in.
no. So I agree that it needs to be done. If a special assessment needs to happen, that's going to be a long process, which I wouldn't be opposed to, but there has to be some teeth to it, not just, hey, I didn't pay my bill.
Yeah.
There should be, some teeth to it, like there's a lien on your house because you didn't pay your bill. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be some teeth to it, not just, hi, I paid my bill, but my next door neighbors didn't,
Right.
Is we
And-
do, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I mean, there's a point, and I like the fact that, of course, the waterways, are like a roadway, but then the roadways aren't driveways either, right? And so, there's got to be a point where the property owners need to take responsibility for their driveways, right? The main thoroughfare and all that, we're already taking care of this big area here that seems to be, that's where everything catches, right?
right?
And it just flows down. And so that treatment of that keeps all of that down.
Yeah.
I think there's a point where the city should take some responsibility. But as far as assessment, I'm totally on board with that. But I don't think it's anything we can get done this
Right,
year.
Right.
So I think we should go forward with taking care of it this year. But then working on that for next year, maybe possibly having that in our strategic meeting at the end of the year.
Okay.
Well, and with the budget coming up, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great opportunity. I'm sure there will be other things besides this where we think, hey, is there a different way we could think about this, both from council, but as well as staff, where we might be more efficient in how we spend our money or share the costs with people who are the
Mhm.
direct beneficiaries.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to the next? All right. Moving on to discussion item 6B, limiting parking to one side of the street. It's on page 14. Ryan?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, so last year, and I'm sure I would venture to guess that this has probably been maybe a common concern that's come up at times is emergency vehicle access or parking on one side of the street or the other, and challenges maybe with getting down certain streets in certain areas. So we heard some of those concerns kind of coming up, at least I did, at least as a city staff member, last spring as more folks were in town. And then you heard your short-term rental task force that kind of touched on this as a formal recommendation of theirs to review areas within residential districts that may be best to have no parking on one side of the street. So last fall, the city engineer kind of prepared an initial set of recommendations based on some of those concerns and provided his feedback on certain streets that may be candidates for no parking on one side of the street or the other. And so recently I shared those recommendations with Chief Janik, and Chief Janik and Scott Herbert, with Public Works, kind of did a boots on the ground analysis of those different streets. And before you this evening is essentially those recommendations and if there is interest from the council in limiting parking to one side of the street or the other, what streets would be candidates, and then what side of the street would be best for no parking signage. So my understanding, and Scott's here, and he can certainly touch on it as well. I know that the chief certainly stressed to me that he understands this is a tough balancing act for the council, and it's a tough discussion to have. Certainly, if you do no parking on one side of the street or the other, you are going to limit the number of parking options that are available. At the same time, he mentioned that there are very real issues and concerns that he has with getting down certain streets on especially busier weekends when there's an emergency and they've had difficulties getting ambulances in and would have concern with getting a fire truck in if there were a fire. And, and he was very clear to me that, all of that stuff is documented in a report that they complete at the end of the day as well. And so, so they took a look at, where are hydrants at, utilities at, and then Scott kind of explained to me today that they looked at also trying to the extent that they could have some consistency with the recommendations too, that if it's an east-west street, that it's, no parking on the north side, or I'm sorry, parking on the north side, but no parking on the south side, and then vice versa on those north-south streets. So before you use the recommendation, from staff, if you have an interest in pursuing this further. Scott did mention previously to me as well that during some of the busier event weekends last year that they did put out some no parking signage on one side of the street or the other to kind of see how this went. My understanding is that went quite well. There weren't any major issues. Certainly a lot of folks still visited and found their way around. So look forward to your discussion and your direction from here on whether you want to implement this or make some modifications or take a further look at it.
Okay, who'd like to kick it off? Anyone? Go
I
ahead,
would.
Russ.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm in support of this. I think it's a safety issue. It's been around this community for a long, long time, and especially as some of the reasons that were mentioned by the citizens that spoke. Conditions have changed a bit where we see people at different times of the year than we've seen them previously. The first thing that comes to mind on this for me is, could we make this more of a seasonal? And number two is making sure that the DPW staff who really scrambled last year, thank you to Scott and his team for getting those signs up. It was a real last minute thing. And then after it was said and done, it served its purpose, but it was a tremendous amount of effort for Scott and his team. So I think, some type of permanent signage would be appropriate, as well as thinking about maybe limiting it to certain times of the year. Perhaps, and out of all due respect to the people that live in those areas that would be impacted, and be interested to hear their feedback on that. But, we've continued to trim down the number of parking spots, especially with the on-street dining, which I'm not saying this is a trade-off, but this is a safety issue first. That's a convenience issue for the outdoor dining. So I would say if we have to really kind of manage the total number of spots available for people to park, you got to find a balancing point on this. And I say this is first because of safety. So, but if it's going to take away enough spots, and I don't think there's any way to even calculate that as the number of spots that would be taken by this, you'd have to look and say, okay, are we losing 75 spots, for instance? Are we losing 100? And that's kind of where I go with this, is thinking, how can we get the safety aspect that we need? But number two is making sure we don't inconvenience people more than we need to. And, making sure that it's manageable for our staff too.
Yeah, I mean, the safety trumps it all, so I mean, I'm in favor. I live up on the hill like Bobby and Mark, and, yeah, I mean, it can get to the point where people are parking in front of fire hydrants, people are doubling up and, and yeah, you can't get a vehicle through. So the safety aspect is huge. I'm intrigued by Councilmember Gardner's comment about seasonality. It's sort of like plowing regulations, no parking during April to October. So that might have merit to
Yeah.
do it seasonally.
So I have a question about that, though. If you're trying to get a vehicle through it, an emergency vehicle through it,
Right.
what difference does it make what season it is?
Right.
Right.
And even more so
This is
in the
all the
winter if
time.
they're parking on both
Yeah,
sides.
Right.
no.
There's that.
So, yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
yeah, that's okay.
It could be a winter event or,
Yeah, of course.
things could, change,
But- If I may, I'm very comfortable with this I mean, our DPW superintendent's been through it. Our engineer who we pay to go through this has been through it, and our fire chief has weighed in. It's a safety issue. It's our responsibility to keep our citizens safe. I'm great with this as written.
Yeah, go ahead, Holly.
Well, yeah, and seasonal, I think, is problematic. The high school basketball games. I mean, you cannot get down Main Street. I mean, you can barely get my car down Main
Yeah.
Street. So,
Yeah.
and we have emergencies all year round. It would be interesting because people are going to say, well, where do people park then? Are there things we could do with the interurban or somehow find ways to push people to parking, in other areas and see if we can help solve some of that problem, Greg.
We sure
That-
hope so.
That has been, I've talked about that for as long as I've lived here. And I know folks like Marilyn Starring and folks that we've done the hospitality seminar that we've talked to, employees as well. Wood employees, I know we've just talked recently with Interurban for weekend shuttle services. And then we reached out to business owners to say, hey, would your employees take advantage of this? Because I'm going to tell you, like I've said before, half of these parking places that are taken up in this town are by employees. Will they use the shuttle? No, they won't. We have tried so many things, and you know that through the CVB. I know that even before I served on the Interurban board, being with the Saba board, that we tried so long to make solutions for that, for employees to use these shuttles. They're not using. They're just, it's just not happening.
I know.
And folks want to drive their car right in front of their business where they're managing or where they're owning. A
I
lot of
think-
these cars are also owners as well that are in the downtown area. That brings that overflow. We advertise a lot about the parking shuttle and the on-call demand service, the parking at the high school and the lots that we have here downtown. It's great to have a parking problem, right?
I know.
But
Charging for
I do
parking.
want to say, this is a no-brainer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is something that I know that folks on the Hill have been asking for even since before you were here, Bobby. We've heard this request by folks that have lived here for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's a long time coming, and I think it should be all year. I don't think it should just be seasonal. Again, who knows? What if CVB comes up with a brilliant winter event that's bringing thousands of people to town, So I think it should be all year round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of it as well. I am curious about Pleasant Street in that they're recommending no parking on either side of Pleasant Street. And as you know, there's a lot of short-term rentals on that street that have a lot of cars.
It's
And I-
just too narrow.
But it's just too narrow. I mean, it's, there's curbs on each side, so you can't get off the road any further. So I think even with, I would be curious to hear from residents on Pleasant Street to have no parking on either side.
Do have off-street parking on that street for like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That first curve that comes around, you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? There's like 2 or
There's a
3
cottage
parking
there
spots.
with no parking.
Right.
Like, so I would hope that their guests could use that spot, but
Several
other
of
than
those
that,
houses are guilty of that. I know
Yeah.
that several from several management companies that have houses on that.
yeah,
Mill Pond Realty
Yeah.
has 2 houses that they manage on that road. And
Yeah.
I know we've taken the extra level of asking our renters to now have it's kind of like a park pass now.
okay,
So that we ask them to put it in their window when they rent from us.
okay.
So, and we're very, very adamant about not parking on Pleasant Street.
Okay.
On the house.
So that's good. I mean, it'd be interesting because I would think most of the residents there have enough parking and
That way,
as long
if you-
as,
Right,
yeah.
that way, if you see a car, at one of our rentals, you've got that on their dashboard.
Yeah.
That they're a renter from Mill Pond, and it gives you that phone number to call so that we can get that car out of the way.
yeah. I certainly hope that the discussion of parking is something we can talk about because at some point we have to do something different because we keep doing the same thing, talking about it in the same way, and it's just not changing.
Right.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Mayor, I think we missed the ball, purchasing the Chemical Bank property. I think that would have been a good investment for our city.
I don't know that it was,
Never brought up.
well, it wasn't because it
Yeah,
had
but,
to do with
I
the
think
real
that would've been
estate
a great
deal.
investment.
Yeah, we didn't have, it had to, anyways, that's a whole nother topic because they had to go to a bank
Being off.
first.
Yeah.
It wasn't up to us at first.
Right.
So, anyone else?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just put out the idea about having seasonality just because I've seen it used in other towns that have similar good problems like we have. And I would not stand in the way of this if that were not to be the case here. But I'm thinking, so when people come to town, that many of them have been here before, but I'm still shocked working the parking lots for the summer for the schools. I'll ask people, is this your first time here? I'm shocked by the number of people say it's my first time in Saugatuck.
Yeah.
And so where I'm going with this is that perhaps what the city can do, and it was mentioned, I think somewhere in the report, is that wayfinding is still an issue. So what I'm thinking is that if we put up permanent signage, simple no parking sign as we have, okay, where do I park, and put a QR code, get a sign made with a QR code. We could use these all over town. You could just literally take a picture of it, go to a site that would tell you, okay, here's where the interurban goes. Here's where you can go to park. Now, it's not to guarantee you a spot, but at least can give you some direction, because that's something that's missing. Because if I drive up on Main Street and I'm like, I can't park here, well, where do I go? Where do I literally go from here for people that have never been to town?
I think that'd be a great project for CVB and Interurban to work on together.
Yeah.
I think that that QVC, that QR code can take us right to, in my head, I'm thinking offhand, to the Saugatuck.com website, which we could possibly work together with Interurban for places to park, like the high school.
And I would,
And all of our.
yeah, and I will tell you, in other communities, I was just in Siesta Key, and they had a trolley system where they had like basically bus stops where you would just walk, get to the bus stop, and it was constantly picking you up every 5-10 minutes. And it just felt good because you knew, you just looked for the sign and there it was. You went to that spot and you knew somebody was going to pick you up. So I always thought that would be a nice change, other than saying everybody park at the high school. If there was actual stops around town, that I think that would be the best way to do it personally.
Like milfoil, and I don't think we can get it sorted out this year, but I'll bring up what some of you are probably tired of me talking about. Is like, isn't there a way we can make it, and this goes to the trolley comment, make it kind of fun for people to park off-site and catch like a hop on, hop off
Yeah.
kind of. It's a trolley. It's
Yeah.
a horse-drawn
Horse.
wagon. Or we do something, I mean, I'll bring it, or we do something with like golf carts, where you can park more, in the town.
Right.
I mean, do we need to do something clever?
It's
We need
something
a
could
parking
try
task
again.
force.
It's something that we have done over and over, over the years, the previous years. We have tried doing something like that. It just, we're not as big as a lot of the towns that you're talking about where
Yeah.
you see that.
Right.
We find that people are really spoiled with their cars.
Any
Um,
any urban planner would laugh their rear end off about how we do not have paid parking in town.
Downtown.
Right.
No.
It's absolutely.
A lot of tourist
beyond-
towns in
yes,
Michigan
of
have
course they
moved to it.
Not even
Petoskey,
tourist
like,
towns.
yeah.
Get my haircut in Grand Rapids, it's $4 to park,
Right.
right? I mean, I can park way off site and walk 3 blocks, but I'm lazy, so I'm not gonna do that. I pay my $4, so.
Right.
It's become easier too with the,
The kiosks that they have, it's
the
not
apps
there's not
and the apps on your
meters.
phone. I mean,
Yeah.
These are
yeah.
big towns that I go to, but like Lansing, but
Yeah.
now you just have an app on your phone and,
Holly, go ahead.
Planning Commission is looking into parking as a priority for the planning commission.
Excellent.
So.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so otherwise, you guys, do you like the recommendations of every single street? Do we feel good about what they're recommending?
Yes,
defer to staff.
Yep.
They're in their.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I would just challenge us to find creative ways to make sure that people that are new and they see that I can't park here anymore, there's something that gives them direction on where they can go. I think it's just incumbent on us as a visitor, visitor-based community, tourist-based community. We
I
have
think
to
that's a
help.
great idea.
We've got to help people out more than we
That
do.
should be included on the signs, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just one more item, I assume this will be a line item in our budget of the number of signs that we're going to have to purchase.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll get an estimate on that, and I'm gonna aim to bring this to your next probably regular meeting. So let's give you a couple weeks to think about it, but we'll bring it to you in
Yeah.
a couple weeks, and
And this will be installed before the summer season or?
assuming you pass it, that'll be our aim and our goal. Yep.
I mean, yeah, the world didn't end for Venetian when we did it
No.
temporarily.
mm-mm.
People, and the high school's project's wrapping up, so.
And people start to figure out, don't show up with 10 of you in 10 cars, right? We'll start to figure that
Right.
out, so.
And
All
I'm
right,
gonna-
you guys.
And I'm gonna go on the record and saying, we need to encourage people to come into town with other types of vehicles, bikes.
Yes.
We need to, and as a matter of fact, urban planners will tell you is that the more roads you build doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a good thing. You need to figure out ways to direct people to come into town in different transportation modes. I'm not a fan of building more roads. I'm a fan of figuring out how to get people into town easier, and bikes is one of them. There's a lot of people coming to town on bikes and we're just not bike friendly yet.
All right. I do want to move along just because we have a 7 o'clock meeting coming up and I want to make sure we get through every item. Peter, did you want to say one more thing on that?
Get to the podium.
We need some teeth in our parking tickets at the cops, right? We need some teeth in it. We have no teeth with these parking tickets.
Right. Well, once you have signs, then you would be able to write a ticket.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Moving on to item 6C, request for contribution to the July 5th fireworks show. This is on page 19 of your packet. Ryan?
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you, Madam Mayor, and maybe I'll tag team with Lisa Mize on this if that's okay, and so she I think the CVB's kind of taken on maybe it's more the planning aspects of fireworks this year. As you know, that the city did last year, and that's a huge lift, right? That's a heavy lift, and so.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, but grateful, for your work and my understanding is they have kind of some folks that have worked on fireworks in the past, kind of like assisting or providing some information to them as they kind of evaluate that. But Lisa's as I approached the city, wondering if the city is willing to contribute to a fireworks show this year. And my understanding from past conversations with the council is that you don't want staff to be involved with the planning it necessarily, but that there may be interest in contributing. But the other piece to this is that given where we are in the year, or maybe a little late to get a vendor for fireworks on July 4th, that could be problematic. And so my understanding from Lisa is South Haven is shooting their fireworks on July 3rd, Holland on July 4th. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to actually kind of shoot on July 5th and kind of have bring maybe more folks in. So
That's a Saturday, right?
Friday.
Oh, it's Small Town Saturday night, okay.
Yep.
Oh,
That's the name of
That's
the
the vendor? Okay,
company.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I'll turn it over to you as a council, or Lisa, if you, anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah. If there's anything to add to it, it is a brand new vendor, Small Town Saturday Night, strange name. They're out of Stanton, Michigan. He's been very easy to work with. He's fully aware of all the permits that have to be filled out. I've spoken with Mr. Janik.
Yeah,
Chief
Chief
Janik.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
Spoken with Chief Janik. And he's going to help. I'll say that. He's in favor of this and he said, we'll make this work. So there's a meeting on April 17th at 10 o'clock in the morning at the CVB with all the players. Chief Janik, the police, sheriff, Marine Division, DNR, and Coast Guard. As many people that can be there will be there, and the vendor will be there via Zoom.
Okay.
So,
And so what you found was that they were not available on the 4th.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's late in the game for that.
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I talked with Chief Janik today as well, and he voiced his support for working with the CVB to get the event going, as well as the other parties involved. The question, and they're doing some due diligence on this company right now, just to make sure that they're legit. Based on what Chief Janik told me, they've been around for about 2 years, new to the community. The thing that kind of got my attention when I looked at this is it's almost less than half the cost of what we normally pay for fireworks displays, which normally in a $12,000 to $15,000 range. So I think there's some questions around whether it's going to be a comparable display. Don't know all of that yet, but
The proposal that he's submitted actually lays out the numbers and sizes
yep. Right.
that
Yeah,
I'm not
it's- yeah.
familiar with,
Yep.
but yes,
Yeah, but
of the
not-
fireworks.
yeah,
So
don't
you
know how
could
that
compare.
Pardon me?
You could compare to previous.
Yeah, I'd be just curious. And then the other question was that the company understands that they have to apply to the city. They actually have to put in an event application, if I'm correct, right? For the fireworks display?
Oh, unless that's.
Is that
me.
right?
No, not the company that is issuing it, but who is.
CVB.
So the
That'll be
CVB.
their responsibility?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think there's still some open questions, at least based on what Chief Janet told me today, but he's aligned with the CVB to assist and
And Peter's here. I think, haven't we budgeted 5,000 for the 4th? What's in the budget?
Yes, 5.
Well, there's nothing in the budget yet. I mean, I don't know what we propose, but in the past, it's been between $3,000 and $5,000 that we've always given to whatever organization is promoting it.
Do we give it to the fireworks specifically, or is it like Porta Johns and that sort of thing?
No, the Porta Johns, the Porta Johns, we never did the Porta Johns extra until year of COVID. And then I don't know if we did them last year or not during the 4th with the fireworks.
Yeah.
It had as, I don't think we had as many, but in the past, it was what the Rotary Club did it for a few years, the Cow Hill, then there was the fireworks fund. We just wrote the check right to whatever organization was, like, it would go right to the CVB, not to.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yeah.
Peter, has the city always contributed to fireworks?
Yes.
Because I mean, after last year and even more so, it's just, well, fireworks are problematic for several reasons, but I mean, with all the kerfuffle that we got into, why are we spending it? Is Douglas really gonna give 2,000? If Douglas is giving 2,000, why are we giving 3,000 plus the use of our park, plus the use of our DPW, plus us doing the porta potties? How is this even found out? I mean, I don't know why we're on the hook for the bulk of it and gonna be the host.
So it's the launch is in the middle of the water. So that's why,
Off the park.
but it's also, the viewing is on the Douglas side
Right, so-
over by
So do
Tower.
3,000, 2,000, 1,500 for the CVB? Well, like, where are these numbers coming from?
I'm not sure why, you know,
Okay.
3,000 versus
I know
2.
in the past, the past 20 years or so, Saugatuck City has always supported our fireworks program in the tune of $3,000 to $5,000. And I think that's a great contribution for that. There have been times where Douglas is anteed up and not anteed up, but I really appreciate everything that the CVB is doing to take this role on. I think you're going to do a better job than what the city did last year.
Thanks, Gregory.
Yeah, I'm very appreciative of the CVB stepping up on this as well. And in the past, the city has always contributed to the fireworks. It's varied, as we said. The other thing that has always happened is that there's have been people in the community who have done different fundraisers and different events to raise the additional money that would be
Mhm.
needed to make up the difference. And so for here, it looks like that's going to be minimal in terms of this year.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
um,
So you're asking 3 from us, you're asking 2 from Douglas, and then is the CVB contributing the rest?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Well,
wonderful.
I'm planning on that.
Yeah, and hopefully
haven't asked
getting
my board yet.
contributions as well, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
were you planning on reaching out to any of the business owners?
I was not.
Okay,
I was just going to go to my board and ask for the balance.
right.
Excellent.
I'm in favor. It's
Yeah.
a quick, simple solution. It's much less problematic than the municipalities having to try to pass the hat between each other. That's why we ran into trouble with the township in Douglas last year. They didn't want to give another municipality money for fireworks. This is much
That's
simpler.
great.
This is much simpler, cleaner. As a municipality, we can only spend money on certain holidays, 4th of July being really the only one, that and Armistice Day, and I think Memorial Day or something are the only ones we can actually spend budgeted money on anyway. So I'm in favor.
Good.
Simple.
Anything else from anyone else? Go ahead, Russ,
Yeah,
one
the
more
only other-
time.
Yeah, sorry. The only other question would be in terms of the, there's going to be some barges needed for the displays and so forth. That's not in his cost, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's going to be, do we know what the
Additional.
additional? Do we have any idea what that might be at this point? or is
Tried
that
to
gonna
find
be-
out today.
Okay.
I don't have a number yet.
Right. The meeting next week will probably give you that information. So,
Hoping.
thank you.
Okay.
Actually, if I can say real quick, I wouldn't be opposed to, I know that they're asking for 3,000. I wouldn't be opposed to offering up to 5,000 if needed.
So you paying the other 2, or you mean, oh, us?
I wouldn't. be
As a
opposed
city,
to-
as
I
a
wouldn't be
city.
opposed to following tradition that we've done for the last 20 years. Yeah.
So just the last question that Russ was talking about, you might come back to us for additional dollars for the barges. Is that something that might end up having to happen? I'm sorry. And that's okay, because then we would, like, if it's 3 for the fireworks, then maybe we contribute another whatever for the barges.
Depending on what that cost is, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. So we could end up contributing more,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to go over 5,000,
right?
but that's a drop in the bucket compared to what we spent last year.
Okay.
So would there be other things other than the barges that we might be brought to us later, or is that sort of it?
Not to my knowledge,
Okay.
the proposal from the vendor and the barge.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. All right. Moving on to public comments on anything you would like to speak on tonight. Anyone in the audience?
Bobby Gaunt, 341 Main Street. Now I'm here on behalf of All Saints Episcopal Church. You all have in your packets a special event and parade application. And we are partnering with Douglas Pride. And on Friday evening, we are sponsoring the Holland Jazz Concert Orchestra on the parish lawn at the church. And so I filled out our application. Thank you, Jamie, for your help. This is special because it's the first time, at least in a while, that there has been an explicit agreement between Douglas Pride and an entity in Saugatuck to do this together. The event that they were planning on holding between 5:30 and 7 o'clock on that Friday evening was actually canceled. So this will be the primary event for Douglas and Saugatuck Township Pride. So I hope you'll be able to approve this. I will say that I'm a novice when it comes to this. I'm learning a lot. And we are still in negotiation in terms of what will be required. So I think this is correct, but if it isn't, I'll be coming back for an amendment. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bobby. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak?
Giulianotti at 712 Allegan. Since the last time I was here, and when there was a discussion about the settlement with the former city manager, I had a number of people approach me and give me some information that I was totally unaware of. And that was how long people knew that the manager had a problem. And not only was he confronted by some of the citizenry saying, hey, you got a situation, you need help, got crickets, and found out there were people on this council and the previous council that had been approached about this, chose to ignore it, and you got crickets. So then what happened? When the excrement hit the fan and you had to do something about it, otherwise you might get sued, you made the settlement, and rightfully so, because you put yourself in a position where you could have been sued. So you have to ask yourself, who's responsible for protecting him? Did he have friends? Was it drinking buddies? Who was it? That was wrong. And I will say what I will say again. Anybody who knew that he had the problem and chose to protect him cost this city about $130,000, $140,000. Those people should resign. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Anyone else in the room? All right, anyone online wish to speak? All right. No course, well, we have correspondence for the, that are included in your other packet. Council comments. If you want to go around the room when it comes to this, we can always just do it in the regular meeting, but I can go around the room. Holly, anything? Russ, anything?
No.
Nothing.
Helen,
Now we
Scott.
have another meeting to go to.
Gregory,
No.
Logan.
Thanks to the CBB for wrangling the fireworks. I
Yes.
was worried about that this year, and now I'm not.
Great.
It's really great.
Thanks, Logan. All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our workshop agenda.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Adjourned. And go ahead and take a break and we'll